Everybody, my name is Autumm Caines, and I am a facilitator of an online networked faculty development experience called DigPins. That's DIGPINS. And I'm here with other facilitators who have also used DigPins as a framework for talking about digital identity, pedagogy, networks, and scholarship in their institutions as well. So I said that DigPins is a networked experience. So it's networked because we have all of these different facilitators from different institutions who facilitate DigPins in their own environments. And the content is basically those, it's an acronym, so the pedagogy, identity, networks, and scholarship are different themes that we explore over a 4-week period. Everything happens completely online, and it is a way to develop online community at an institution and explore online community at an institution. We wanted to get together and talk a little bit about different elements of DigPins from different lenses. It started off, I think, in 2016 at St. Norbert College with Sunday Richard, who was not with us here today, but she was the first person who developed DigPins and implemented it there at St. Norbert. I actually started working at St. Norbert in 2017 and implemented it while I was there and presented at a conference with Sunday about the experience where we met Joe Murphy. We knew Joe Murphy before that, but he came to our poster presentation and said that he was interested in using this experience at Kenyon College where he works. And so Joe and I decided, let's see what would happen if we maybe run this together. And that began this idea of doing DigPins as a networked experience between different institutions to kind of create some cross collaboration. So I'll turn things over to Joe and let him talk about that just a little bit and talk about things from his lens.
Sure. So I think that one of the really interesting challenges for DigPins is that it's both a curriculum, it's a structure of readings and online activities that are designed to get faculty members' feet wet, hands dirty, whatever metaphor we want to use, in different networked environments, and to really think carefully about how those different environments might be useful to them as individuals, as members of professional networks, as teachers, and as scholars. But for that to work, it's also very deeply rooted in pedagogical principles of professional development and education, that we're looking to create a space which allows for networked emergent outcomes. And that's very complicated to communicate in 4 weeks, which turns out to always feel like a very small amount of time. That we have people who show up looking for lots of structure, like we're going to give them the How to Twitter Good book, and they need to take that on. But that, we also need to respect that that's kind of a reasonable thing for them to want. So that balancing act is always tricky. Every year it's tricky. This year, I think that was really thrown into relief. We started our design process for this right as COVID-19 was hitting, and we realized we were going to have to really reconsider a lot, both what people's experience was of digital networking and of online teaching, and then what was coming in the future was even less certain than it is now, which is still pretty darn uncertain. So we were in the process of doing a lot of developing to address the current situation. And then right as we were launching the uprising after the murder of George Floyd, it happened. And again, we found ourselves needing to make sure that we were leaving appropriate spaces for people to have the conversations and the processing that they needed to do, and to understand how those issues were coming out in these different networks that we were looking at. So that's been, I think this was a particular year for me for exploring this challenge between the more structured and predictable curriculum and the way that real learning comes from human relationships. And I might throw that over to Taylor to talk about kind of his lens and thoughts.
Hi, I'm Taylor Jaden. I work at St. Norbert College as an instructional technologist. And after Autumm left St. Norbert for her current institution, I took over the facilitating of DigPins here. And so we've been doing DigPins in various forms at St. Norbert for 4 years. And so I'm kind of coming at it from a standpoint of a lot of the faculty that that I work with and that our team worked with frequently have gone through DigPins, or at least many of them have. And so we're always kind of trying to push the boundary of how we talk about and promote DigPins, so we get other faculty who might be interested in and participating. So one of the things that because of that, one of the things I find most interesting and valuable about DigPins is that I think it does a really good job of modeling a high quality online learning experience. So all the content is delivered on open websites. So each cohort has a website, and we kind of go off of a template that we develop together in a given iteration of DigPins. But we tweak it a little bit for our local cohorts as well. And in addition to that, those websites are also used for blogging, and we encourage our participants to blog about their experience as they go. So for many of them, it's the first time or one of the first times that they've done writing on a small open website like this. And then they comment, and it's one big part of the community aspect. Then on top of that, we also use Slack for cohort communication, as well as the larger community. So we have channels for our local cohort, and we have channels for everyone currently taking DigPins. And again, I think that it's a really effective way to model a more community-based way to teach and learn online. So many of our faculty are coming into this maybe never having taken an online class, or if they have, their perception of an online class might be very sort of broadcast and, thinking like in the LMS, very structured content, and maybe at most community building via forum tools. I love this more connected learning approach, basically, that we're kind of facilitating, not instructing specifically the entire time. So the last thing we use is Twitter. And so again, the last major thing that we usually use is Twitter. And again, that is a good way to model like how you might run a course online. So I think that's really valuable for faculty. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Meha.
Thank you, Taylor. I think one of the best things about using open technologies is that it enabled what I'm going to call local professional development. So because of COVID-19, everyone in the world has gone digital, and so their teaching and their professional development is now happening digitally. And so it makes sense, if you're going to do professional development anywhere, to have a global cohort, because why not? Because they're going through something similar. And it's easy for them to find intersections where it makes sense. And so my cohort at the American University in Cairo in Egypt, they valued Slack for this, and they valued Zoom sessions, which I'll talk about in a second, because they really valued understanding what faculty in the US were doing. There were a few others who thought it was distracting from the context, and so next to the Slack private and public spaces, we also had Zoom spaces with the global cohort, and also private spaces where I just met my own cohort a couple of times on Zoom to reflect on how it was benefiting them locally. And one of the best things is, because it's not instructivist and people are free to choose to do whatever they want, is that if someone likes Twitter, they could keep using Twitter. If someone prefers the private Slack for just our cohort, they could do that. If someone wants to go beyond and always be talking to the folks from the other cohorts, they could do that. So they had all those options. The other thing is, aside from modeling good pedagogy and good connected learning to the faculty, it was also a sandbox space for us, the facilitators, because we could experiment with things that were slightly less traditional than what we would use in our most required university professional development. So, for example, we realized that we're going to have, oh my God, almost like more than 40 people. And sometimes if we wanted to meet them synchronously, there wouldn't be an opportunity for everyone to introduce themselves. So we started thinking of using things like liberating structures and breaking them out into breakout rooms and doing interesting activities with them. And my cohort really valued liberating structures. And after they experienced that, they thought it was very beneficial. They wanted to then, train other people in our university, maybe to use them in their own teaching. And what I realized is, even though I am still using liberating structures, these are just ways of doing large group conversations in ways that are equitable and promote like brainstorming and problem solving really quickly. I realized that what I was doing locally with my required professional development type of things that I was doing for everyone is that I was doing them, but I wasn't emphasizing that they were called liberating structures and emphasizing why we were doing it that way. Whereas with this cohort, it was a little bit clearer that, oh, look, this is what we're doing, and this is why we're doing it, what it enables. And I just want to say that the ability to experiment and to have a connected learning experience in this time in my life, especially where I have to do a lot of required LMS-based things with a small group of faculty rather than a large group of faculty, was really important for my own well-being as a faculty developer, to be able to have that space to experiment and be a little bit more creative and intimate. And to work with great facilitators like all of you guys, who I know are on the same wavelength, rather than with people whose thinking is a little bit. Christine.
So I'm Christine Moskel. I'm an instructional designer at Colgate University in upstate New York. I'm a new facilitator for DigPins, and this past summer I brought with me a small cohort of 3 female faculty from Colgate, and I was drawn to DigPins because of its focus on the identity as like the foundational pin. One's digital identity really providing the foundation for shaping your pedagogy or your scholarship or your networks. And that topic of digital identity was something that my group at Colgate had been exploring in the past year. And I just knew about DigPins because many of my facilitators here are part of my personal learning network. So DigPins was always in the back of my mind around that's something that our group can do as a way to dive deeper into digital identity, but also how it's connected to pedagogy networks and scholarship. So like others have said, DigPins was really a chance for me to facilitate a connected learning experience with my small group as practice to do this on a larger scale at Colgate. And again, my small cohort were sort of my guinea pigs, if you will, around like for helping me identify where they might get stuck as ways for me to then reflect, okay, these are things I need to address in the future. For example, I've been on Twitter. I'm not a resident in Twitter, if you will, but like I've been on Twitter for a few years, and we had a big pause during the networks week when we my colleagues set up their Twitter accounts. Like, what do you put in your Twitter profile? And that was something that I had taken for granted. And again, this ties back into what identity do you want to put on, I guess, in your Twitter profile. So again, this was just a chance one for me. It was like professional development for me to facilitate a professional development experience for others, if you will. And so again, it was just really helpful for me, again, kind of mentoring my colleagues at Colgate through this journey. And then I felt like I was on a journey with them, identifying where are they getting stuck, what additional support do they need on a local scale here at Colgate, and then also pointing them to this larger network at DigPins around, these faculty at other schools might be going through the same thing. So that was my experience about DigPins. And when I think about the future, I mentioned that identity was really the pin that brought me to DigPins. And I'm just thinking in the future, given the COVID pandemic, that perhaps if I were to predict and make a hypothesis, that perhaps pedagogy will be the draw that I'll play off of to recruit other people to join DigPins when I run this again next year, hopefully. So I think at least for me, in terms of bringing other people into this experience, I think for me it's been a topical focus, like what's the topic of interest to other people, and then I can hook them in to this experience and then they can learn the tools to further explore these issues and also their connection to the other pins. So with that, I'm going to open it up to my DigPins facilitators, who also are going to share their thoughts about their vision for the future of DigPins moving forward.
So I'm thinking along the same lines, Christine, that and some of this is based off of, I guess this is my third, I think, successful run of DigPins, as well as a couple of others that I've kind of had my eye on. And I'm finding a similar need to develop themes more intentionally. And I think one of the interesting questions that you're making me think about is how much that's something that we all do together, and how much that might be something that can happen in the local groups. But that's left to think about. But I'm finding myself wondering if there's a way to think of it even as far as, DigPins and open scholarship, or DigPins and community connected pedagogy. I don't know what theme will be most resonant for Kenyon faculty next year yet, but that is one of the issues that I'm trying to think about, how we can make it maybe de-emphasize a little bit about this is identity week. And in a week, you'll have a full, accurate definition of your identity in all possible network spaces, and maybe to draw out some of those themes in a different way than we've been trying to. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about in future iterations.
I'll say at St. Norbert, I'm kind of thinking about, last few iterations of DigPins, we've been making thinking of how we can make the connected across institution parts more valuable, right? So this last time in this summer was the first time we all shared a Slack team, or whatever they're called now, workspace, I don't know. That I think was really valuable. But I think I need to more intentionally think about how I'm contextualizing this for my local cohort. I think especially some of the people that we're now getting at St. Norbert taking DigPins, they could use some, more small group, unstructured discussion, basically, of the week's content. And a lot of the liberating structures things, I don't mean unstructured in terms of like liberating structures like Mehem talked about. I mean me not prompting them with questions, but them talking about what they feel is valuable. And I think I need to do more of that as a facilitator with just my St. Norbert folks, because I had some feedback of some people saying like there were some great readings. A couple of them I totally didn't understand parts of, and I was like, oh well, that would have been, I could have helped you with that during the time, So clearly they need a little bit more of that type of thing at St. Norbert. The folks taking it this last time at least did. And on top of that, another idea that was thrown out, I think Autumm mentioned it, was like the idea of even having office hours, basically, of just here you can drop in and we can talk about what's going on in the week. Maybe any of the facilitators could be there, or we'd have specific ones or something like that, to have another way to engage a different type of participant. I think some of our participants get a lot out of the Slack discussions, some get a lot out of Twitter, some get a lot out of blogging, and I think another thing we could do is more drop in, drop out kind of conversations via Zoom or Google Meet or whatever.
As you said that, Taylor, something occurred to me. Matthew Crossland has worked on something called like sort of multiple pathways that the learner sets for themselves. which could be more or less structured. And so they could follow a path if they want some guidance, or they could go their own way if they don't want to. And maybe in DigPins, we could offer different types of paths. So like a path of the networker, they're going to do 1, 2, 3. Or if you're the writer, the reflective writer, you're going to do 1, 2, 3. And sort of like persona them. People don't have to stick to one persona, but they could try different things. Because in my cohort, I had people who were very happy with being open, and others were like, I'm going to write Google Docs and I don't feel comfortable blogging public. I'm like, that's totally fine. Just reflect on your own, share it with one person you trust, and that's okay, right? And there were people in my cohort who really liked the Zooming, but they didn't have time or interest in all the other stuff as much. And also the other thing that I thought was tricky is a lot of mine wanted more time on pedagogy, but they also wanted more time to use something like hypothesis. And obviously we introduced it in the last week. It's like you can't introduce 10 tools the first week, right? We already introduced them to like 3 tools. So it's kind of tricky, like you don't know who from your cohort is going to like which tool, and you can't introduce them all at the beginning. And so what we're thinking is the continuity that should go on behind, like there's a community locally at least that was formed that I think will continue to support each other through these kinds of things and think about how does this diffuse to a campus so that it's not just, 15 people who learn something new, but also maybe what they've learned can maybe transfer on beyond. But for next year, then it's also thinking about, well, who will be the new people? I know in some of the institutions have been doing this several times. Sometimes the same people come back. And so this thematic thing that Joe is talking about means you can come back and the theme will be different. So it's not going to be like we're doing the same readings, the same activities. It's going to be some tweaks and a slightly different focus. And that will be nice that some people are familiar with the tools, but not the topic.
Very much so. And I love how, in us talking about what we're going to do for next year, we're also sort of modeling a bit of the conversation that happens between the facilitators. Because when I think about the future of DigPins, one of the things I always think about is how can we welcome in facilitators from other institutions who would like to be part of this networked experience with us. And so I think giving presentations like this one is one of the ways, and I encourage people who are interested in being part of it to go to digpins.org, where there's more information and a template of the curriculum that we run. One of the things that I've wanted to do for a long time that I haven't made enough time for, that I'd love to get the other facilitators, inspire them, or get some feedback from them about how we could do this, is to do more blogging as facilitators. So there's a couple of blog posts on digpins.org about other presentations that we've done and things like that. But I think it's really interesting, the layer of network, right? The layers of networking that's happening. So, there's the network between the facilitators, there's the network between the participants at different institutions, and then there's the open network in terms of like the personal learning network as well. So a lot of different things going on there. I think it's going to be a bright future for DigPins. I'm excited about it.
If you're interested in running a cohort, or you want to talk to someone about DigPins, what should one do?
I'd say go to digpins.org. All of the information is there, and there's a contact form that you can fill out too.
I'll also say too, feel free to also check out, I think the others will agree, feel free to check out our individual local sites as well. You can get to them if you go to discuss.digpins.org. It actually has all of the blog posts and links to each individual school's local DigPins site, like mine's snc.digpins.org, and that way you can see what we just did this summer. That sometimes the DigPins curriculum always evolves a little bit every time, so the readings are different and give you a little bit more idea of what this actually looks like. I don't do you need to wrap any further.
I think that's great. Thank you so much for everybody for taking in our presentation, and check us out at digpins.org.